Beth, we've both grown up in family businesses. So we're gonna spend some time here to share some of the things of what we learned and what to do next.
Sounds great.
So you grew up in the business of getting the deals done
For sure.
for owners.
Yeah.
And sometimes maybe a little bit of a panic sale or not sure what's next, but I think it's time for me to go. Tell me some of the lessons you've learned about that experience and maybe inspiration for what you do now to be a little more strategic with that conversation, or maybe not even do it at all.
So, growing up, my dad owned a business, and it was he called himself a business broker. And at the time, I never really understood what that meant, but it always involved him helping people around our community find a buyer for their business. He would, oftentimes be having conversations in the evening around, our house, talking on the phone, coaching people through the emotional decisions around exiting the business that they've developed and built and, that has sustained their livelihood, and how really exhausting it was for him, although he loved it, to get those deals across the finish line. Sometimes they were successful, sometimes they weren't. Sometimes we saw them dissolve at the 11th hour. But it gave me a great appreciation for, number one, how transactions like that are not just transactions, they impact a lot of people. It impacts families, it impacts the family of the people who work for you that helped you build that business. And sometimes they're not always the most rational decisions that go into that because it is so emotionally charged. So as a private wealth advisor with Raymond James, as I help people, plan for retirement, plan for their future, invest their money and create the plan, I've really gravitated towards working with business owners and helping them exit their business successfully. And I think it was a lot to do because of what I saw my dad do in my formative years, and really understanding what those transactions look like from the other side of the table.
Okay, good. So I'm gonna tell you so my parents owned a restaurant when I was in college, and my mom made the mistake of hiring a person from the previous owner to be an owner who was a manager who wasn't a good fit. Never talked about communication, right? So it's like the immediate tension of two owners who shouldn't be owners together. And it really inspired me because then I started working for another family company, not my family, but after college, another one. And it's amazing how this repeated itself. It's people who really didn't know how to communicate with each other. It was sort of what I call the useful people thing. Everybody's good at what they're doing, or they know somebody, it's a friend of a family or friend of a friend, and you organize these people and you're doing the work. But you see this in those broker deals where everybody's just kind of doing their thing. They have their skills and it's good, but people haven't really thought about communicating, like what's next for the company based on what we've learned. And that first owner sold the company really in a bit of a panic sale. It wasn't a desperation, but it didn't have to happen that way. And it was almost a rush to get it done and kind of like a big surprise. And the interesting part of it was the reputation of that company over 27 years was integrity. Literally from the ground up, day one, he built this company with one word, integrity. And what it meant was, we do the right thing when no one else is watching. And as a company involved in, using that knowledge to help other companies develop better products and be more on target and avoid litigation and build something better, or just not because it shouldn't be built, that reputation of integrity was so strong and really not recognized and appreciated to say, let's put that in writing in our culture for those new people who haven't been here 27 years or 15 to share that, right? And if it's like, if only that had happened, it could have been a whole different story, because the leadership team was wiped out 6 months later by the new CEO because I don't know whether it was intentional, I was just a new guy there anyway, but it seemed like there was a culture of loyalty, like, I'm loyal, I show up, I do my job, and we don't really talk about performance measures or how it relates to the value of the company, right? Like relating to, as you know, in the broker, what's the value, what's this thing worth as an entity, and you should know that every year anyway. And so from communicating better to understand each other, and then stating our values out loud and saying, okay, everybody, it doesn't matter how long you've been here, this is how we are gonna behave. And almost put that integrity word into writing, like a brief paragraph to say, this is how we do it, in case you don't know, or just to say, out loud, this is how we do it, to say, now we know it. And then we can put it out there as a billboard to our customers to say, oh, by the way, we've been doing this, but we're just gonna say this out loud. And the interesting part of it was, the money was already there. The integrity was literally the word on the street, and people who didn't know us by name were asking us to do what was next for them in a more proactive and even more valuable way to develop their products. And it started with a person named Peter who said, we really want to be the creative people. We want some help with compliance. So it's almost like the next offer was, we want to write the great story, if you will, the storyteller of the product. We want you to be the editor. So we can be the great storyteller, you can be the great editor, and we can complement each other. And it's shocking how many times we don't necessarily realize that's the real value. It's not just how smart we are alone, but it's what's that role. You know, just like in a company, like when you're elevating people from managers to executives, what's that real strength you have that complements mine? So we're not competing with each other or battling for promotions. It's just, as a CEO, I want to be that, you know, person viewing the horizon. And, or if I'm not, well, who else in the company, maybe it's the salesperson who can see the horizon, and do I recognize their strength, and will I elevate them to do that, and then hold them accountable to it, and build that team to do that. So that makes the company more valuable. So let's talk about why this is important, because regardless of that broker, let's not make the panic sale, let's not sell too soon. Let's build something that's really better for all of us, and let this thing be the entity, because a lot of times, you know, like my mom and, you know, even that first owner I worked for out of college started the company because they didn't want to work for somebody else, right? And all of a sudden now I've got this company, I'm like, oh, I didn't, now what? Now I'm working for my employees. That's not what I wanted. Tell me about some of the lessons you've seen with people with regard to recognizing a future and what the numbers look like in terms of, okay, so if I'm gonna build something here, what is it that I do want next? And maybe setting up that target. Without necessarily knowing all the answers yet.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that you're exactly right in that it needs to be something that is done structurally, internal, independent of whether or not you think you want to sell today or you want to sell 5 years from now, or how you even want to structure what that sale looks like. Is a sale really you're just passing the business on to your kids? That is a change of ownership, and that is an exit of you from the organization, and the organization needs to be ready and primed for that. So things that are important during an exit, a successful exit, is a strong management team. Do you have people in place that can carry on when you step away in the same fashion, and to be able to help grow the business? Do you have do you have a diversified customer base? Are you reliant on one entity to be able to drive all of your business? That's kind of a red flag to someone who might want to sell it. So are you doing what you need to do to diversify your customer base? Are you growing that leadership team? And then, the other part of it is, are your books in a good order? Like, do you have a lot of commingling of messy things going on in your personal life and your business life? For example, do you have your nanny who's taking care of your kids on the payroll in your business? Not my judgment call, but it is something that the new owner is probably not going to have that expense. So you want to make sure that the numbers look really, really good. Are you paying for your vacations and wrapping them around like an industry conference that then turns into a 2-week vacation, and is that all expense through your business books? You're going to want to have that stuff cleaned up too. So in order for you to be primed and ready at any given moment for someone to come knocking on your door, you need to have your house in order. But I think it really starts with a strong management team that can carry on your culture, that can carry on your legacy, and that they're empowered to do that. And so, structurally, from a governance perspective, you've got to have those things in place in order to be successful.
Yeah, and so oftentimes, kind of like owners who maybe think of themselves as imposters.
Yeah.
People think I've never really been a manager or a leader before.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure how to do that. Kind of getting into, I know some people think of this as like a therapy session, like, oh, we need to just talk it through and understand each other. But like you said, with the management team, sometimes it's kind of getting back to that, what have I learned so far? Because you've done a lot of things. When you grow a company, you've done a lot of things you've never done before, you know?
Sure.
You learn about financing, you learn
Yeah.
about how to measure performance, and you learn about what good and bad customers look like, and what a good and bad quarter performance looks
Yeah.
like, you know, and budgeting, and so those are things you didn't know when you started. A lot of people don't know that. Even people that went into finance have no idea what to do. They
Yeah.
know how to work an HP 12C calculator, but they don't know what it means in
Yeah.
application and practice, right?
Or
And-
what debt means to your company. Is there good debt? Is there bad debt? How do
Exactly.
you leverage this?
Yeah.
And then what does it mean to your cash flow? What does it mean to you as the business owner's lifestyle if you've got, you know, like it's great to have a new shiny building, but you just leverage yourself up to pay for that? And what does that mean for your
Yeah,
cash flow
or
and your
some-
ability to borrow again?
Yeah, or when you have no debt, like
Correct.
the reason you have no debt is because you have no growth plan, so you're
Right,
just kind of
right,
riding on the
right,
cash you
yeah,
got, and
yeah.
that one or two big customers or 10 customers, and you're like, hope this doesn't fail.
Yeah.
This is good for now, but it may not be good
Yeah.
for the future. And so it's really kind of a fun adventure too, when you think about it as an owner, rather than panicking about, I need to call that broker
Yeah.
and do the deal. And then the other thing is, you know, when you work with the wrong people, and this is why, you know, I just bring it up, because you want to be patient as you're meeting people that you've never worked with before, whether it's a broker or, you know, a coach like me or an advisor like you, or that, the attorney you've never worked with, who's focused on what's next, not just the business agreements and
Yeah.
contracts, which are good, but that's not what's next. Those are the fundamentals. You want that forward-looking person, and a person who's knowledgeable about the law or the structure, and then you can get involved in conversations about what's the good fit and
Yeah.
that messiness part of it, right? Which is what we get in the messiness in the middle, I call it. The fun part is when you start thinking that way, you start engaging those people who might be rising stars to get into this context 3 or 4 years before you ever really even care about doing the
Yeah.
deal. And maybe the deal is a kind of a coincidence. It just
Yeah.
happens because you're just doing the right thing.
That's right.
And getting away from 16-hour days as an owner, or getting from the panic of, I wanted to build a sales team, but I can't build it myself. Well, maybe you don't have to. Maybe you've
Yeah.
got a person to your right who's already there, but they've never done that before. And if you could just engage them with people who might be able to facilitate that, you know, then the conversation moves along, and you're doing these things, and you're actually making your life better along the way, and then you can think freely about what's next,
Yeah.
and maybe start to talk with someone like you about, okay, so what would that number look like for me?
Right.
And do I really want to walk away from this? Maybe I
Right.
want to be the chairperson of my
Right,
company,
right,
and let's
yeah.
invite that conversation and bring an investment banker if it is, or maybe it isn't. Maybe it's just a conversation among owners and the attorneys, and you just develop the agreement. It doesn't have to be the scary private equity
Right.
sale, which can
Yeah.
terrify the hell out of people because
Sure.
they don't know what it is. And oftentimes, you know, some people in those areas aren't necessarily sure either. They don't really care. They just want to take assets, they want to take client
Yeah.
lists, and they have their own strategic move already in place without regard. And you know, as we've talked about in other conversations, where an owner gets locked into this performance expectation and doesn't really know what they're getting into, and they're kind of like a general manager without any authority, and then they're being given these orders, but they have no authority in which to influence that expectation. So to avoid that stuff, just do these right things with elevating people and managers,
Yeah.
recognizing the team, state the vision that's forward-looking, state a culture that's intentional, with values that you live every day, and get to know people who are a good fit based on personality, based on their experience. People like us who've been through family and businesses, we
Yeah.
know the messiness, it's fun, we love our family, and sometimes they're like, I don't want to do what my family's doing, I'm gonna do something else.
For sure. Yeah, and I think that, you know, what you're talking about is the business planning and getting ready for the exit, which, you know, we both have expertise and practice in. But in parallel paths, people need to be ready for what does that mean for me personally? And I think it also needs to be done, you know, 2 to 3 years in advance of actually selling the business. When you get that offer, when someone comes knocking on your door and says, I'm gonna give you $10 million and, you know, I wanna close the sale in the next 120 days, you're not gonna have time at that point in time to digest what that means for you the day after the close. So always being ready on a personal standpoint, of what that would mean. So you need to know what your valuation and kind of where that stands at any given time, but then how does that translate to what that means for you personally? You know, do you want to stay on in some sort of capacity? Do you know that, you know, you really just wanna travel with your spouse? Do you wanna buy another business? But having that all kind of stated and in some sort of a master plan for when the day does come that somebody knocks on your door, that you're ready for that. And that's the role that I help play is in part of in concert with the exit planning.
So we know this from our families, getting involved, you know, they're the self-starters, right? We all know the self-starter thing. So the other takeaway is, be the self-starter, that's cool, don't worry about defending that. Then start to be the dreamer about what's next.
That's
and
right.
what I want from all this
That's
stuff
right.
that I built. So don't just defend the self-starter, be the dreamer, like they do in Paso Robles, California. That's
Yeah.
their thing. Okay, thanks a lot, Beth.
Thank you for having
Okay.
me.